I'm sitting down now with Christina Gerhardt. She is the author of a fascinating new book called Sea Change, and it's looking at how islands are being impacted by rising oceans and climate change. Christina, welcome to the show. We're so glad to have you here.
It's great to be with you, Amity.
Your book is so fascinating. We have all been looking at it and looking at the changes. And I love that you specifically decided to focus on islands. Why was that so important?
The frontline communities, they're most impacted, and one of the things I wanted to do covering the UN climate negotiations is shift the focus away from the US-China standoff, which is really important.
Yeah.
But I wanted to tell the stories of the communities that are most impacted.
Your book is not, it's not just a science book, it's not a textbook. It weaves together art, science, poetry. There's poems, maps, essays. Why did you decide to use this approach? It's very non-traditional.
Yeah, it's a really innovative approach. I refer to it as a symphony sometimes because it has all these different voices. I think we have enough scientific reports outlining the impacts of sea level rise. I think the scientific reports are really important. I just don't think any of us are going to sit down on the couch on Saturdays with a scientific report. And so I decided that a coffee table approach was the best way to convey the topic. And by that I mean just weaving together all these different kinds of stories. It's kind of, I refer to it as the spoonful of sugar approach to a pretty grim topic.
You really succeeded because, I mean, this is very accessible, this book, and it's fascinating. There's so many maps within the book that show what is happening. And before I get to that, though, actually, no, here we are. Let's look at these maps right now. So kind of show us what we're looking at here, because I think this is what makes the book so fascinating.
Right, so what you're showing on the screen right now is the Republic of the Maldives. That's one of the 4 island nations most at risk. It's in the Indian Ocean. The ones most at risk in the Pacific are Tuvalu, Kiribati, and Marshall Islands. But what you're seeing on the left is the islands as they are now, in the middle as they will be in 2050, mid-century, and on the right as they will be by the end of the century. And this is kind of a counterintuitive example if your audience is thinking we're going to hear about disappearing islands, because you see them actually growing in this image. And what the Maldives, because they have a lot of money through the tourism industry, what they decided to do is actually build islands to survive, to save their islands.
Right, because it's a beautiful tourist destination, so this is an island that has been built. Let's look at this next one here, which is, I can't quite see the title. What is this we're looking at?
So this is the main island of the Republic of the Marshall Islands, one of the 4 most at risk I just mentioned. This is the low-lying island of Majuro, or the capital basically too. And atolls have this, they're basically the volcanic islands that have, which are the other kind of islands, high islands, that have sunk down. You can think of the rim of a coffee table, is all that remains. They have a circular shape. They typically have a lagoon like you see here in the middle, but they're often just mere yards across, and they're just miles in terms of their circular shape. So these are the most at-risk islands.
So what we're looking at, you're looking down at the top of a volcano, so the caldera is inside that lagoon, and the land is just the tip of the iceberg, as they would say.
Yeah, it's all that's left. This is 6.5 feet above sea level rise.
Okay.
That's it.
So where we saw the other island growing because of building, there's nothing they can do. This will disappear.
This gets into some of the economic issues related to sea level rise. The Marshall Islands has a really small economy. A lot of the islands in the book have really small economies, and so they don't have the money, unlike the Maldives with its tourism industry, to address this issue. So they're trying to get engineers, they're in conversation with engineers right now from Japan to build a new island in that center, in that lagoon.
Interesting.
But they need the money.
All right. Do we have one more map? Okay, this is our last map. Can you tell us what we're looking at here?
Yeah, so we're looking at Ile de Jean Charles here. My cartographer for the book, Molly Roy, with whom I collaborated, was a little confused by my request for the slide on the right. You're seeing it again as it is presently on the left, in the middle, mid-century 2050, on the right, end of the century 2100. By the end of the century, Ile de Jean Charles will no longer be with us. So this is off the southern coast, this is in Gulf of Mexico, off the southern coast of Louisiana. And basically, because we have extracted so much oil and water from the lands in that area, these islands are just slowly disappearing through natural things like, wave erosion of these islands, but it's also that extraction of fluids that intensifies it.
That makes them sink that much faster.
Yeah, and there's 3 indigenous tribes that have moved there, and they are some of the first so-called climate refugees. There's federal monies that they've been allocated to move inland.
Wow.
Yeah.
You know, island nations, I understand, are responsible for less than 1% of global carbon dioxide pollution and emissions, yet they are disproportionately suffering from what is happening with climate change. Should nations be more responsible? I mean, obviously, the country we were talking about, you were trying to take the focus off of the situation with China and the U.S. and the standoff, and this is something like, what should we be doing for these island nations?
I think with the economic disparity in incomes that I was mentioning, measured nationally by GDP or average salary of individuals, I think that's the real issue, or the crux of the issue in addressing sea level rise. The Marshall Islands is at risk. It doesn't have the money to address this. That's why when you hear at the annual UN climate negotiations that these frontline nations, who, as you said, have contributed less than 1% of CO2 emissions on average. This is why they're asking and demanding monies from the global north. The U.S. is historically the largest emitter. China is presently the largest emitter. So this is why they're really pushing for funds from these nations to help them.
Thank you so much. Thank you for going through all those maps with us. I thought it was so important to show it. It's such a great part of the book, but the book is phenomenal. Sea Change, an Atlas of Islands in a Rising Ocean. And just a reminder, Christina is holding an author event tonight, July 13th at 7 p.m. at Elliott Bay Book Company on Seattle's Capitol Hill.